Dr. Kaveh combines the rigor of professional experience with some of the biggest names in tech and academia, where he holds a PhD from the University of California, Berkeley, and master's from Harvard. So, Dr. Kaveh, welcome. And here we also have Dina. Dina is a rising star in the field of data science. She has in less than 10 years held a number of great leadership positions at one of the biggest tech companies or e-commerce platforms in the region. She held titles of head of data science in one of the largest real estate platforms, Property Finder, and worked as a data scientist for Booz Allen Hamilton and the Financial Times. So welcome both of you. It's a pleasure to have you. And to all the attendees, it's also a pleasure to have you listening to this conversation. So I'm going to give a space for Dr. Kaveh to give a small introduction and maybe why you're here, why you chose to be here today, and then we'll move on to Dina.
Sure. Thank you very, very much, Lean. And it's a pleasure to be here. It's really wonderful to participate in something like this. I just want to quickly introduce the fact that I would not call myself a data scientist. So I may be more interesting or less interesting given that to today's talk, but I'm really a social scientist. My training and degrees are in economics and urban planning, and I sort of stumbled into technology. So I am neither a hardcore technologist, engineer, nor a data scientist, but what I have stumbled across over the last 20, 30 years of my career is the intersection of the computer science and data science with the statistics and sort of econometrics and the business subject matter expertise. Those three pillars, which in my opinion, make up the value of an operationalized sort of data science team. I think in order to get anything done, you need to bring these skill sets together. And my teams and I typically sit in the middle of that rather than being, deep hardcore experts in any of those areas. So hopefully I'll bring more of that vantage point about how to sort of work within the broader frame of what business and government and organizations are trying to get done. So thanks. I've been here in the region for about 8 years. So I've had enough years to become dangerous here. But yeah, most of my life has been back in the US, so I'll have a little bit of a sort of.
And that is actually one of the reasons you're here today. So we have you as an SME in the digital transformation and tech industry, and we have Dina, who's more specific and really specified into the data science industry and data products, which is something we're going to talk about later. So I think the intersection of both of your work is going to be really interesting to discuss. So Dina, I'll give the floor to you to just give us a mini introduction that's maybe not as professional as the one I gave, but feel free to give your input on today and why you joined us.
I don't know, I feel like you would do a better job of introducing me 100 times over than I do myself. So thank you very much. And it's a pleasure to be with you, to have a discussion with you, Dr. Kaveh. I wouldn't give yourself too much of a hard time. My first degree was also in economics. Whilst I don't hold a PhD, I did then go on down the statistics and more the engineering routes. So perhaps we will provide a good balance of views and perspectives to the discussion here. I just want to commend the team who have put together this organization. I think it's really great to fill this gap. I've been in the region for 4 years now. It was actually my Dubai anniversary last week. And I have seen the speed of growth in the market has been unreal. And I think it's really, there's been this gap missing, particularly from the networking space. There are some groups that have aimed to fill this, but more from a technical side. And I think this more holistic approach is where the kind of maturity of the market is right now. So thank you very much for taking the initiative to do it. It will make my job a lot easier when it comes to recruiting in the future, I'm sure of that. And no, I'm delighted to be here. So thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, of course. Thank you both. So the talk is going to be divided in around 4 sections. So we're going to start off nice and easy. And probably this question is for you, Dina, which is just as a starter for the attendees is demystifying data science. So can you define for us data science and AI? And then we're going to dig deeper into how you started in data science.
Sure. So, I mean, there's a million different definitions online or with various levels of marketing. But for me, it's essentially taking something that's raw and impure as data from systems is, and turning it into something of value. Dr. Kaveh mentioned getting value from data. When it comes to the more complex, intellectually complex end of AI, it's the same notion, right? You've taken an input, you've processed, and you get some output that's of value. So I think as simple as that, for me, I'm all about keeping things simple and not overcomplicating, but getting value from data.
Perfect. And there are a lot of definitions that overcomplicate what data science and AI mean for organizations. So Dr. Kaveh, in your experience of those who want to implement digital transformation, how are you able to define AI for them? May simplify the definition in order to make it something tangible that they understand and want to implement for their business. If you have any input on that.
Yeah, for sure. One of the things we try to do every chance we get is help people understand that, help them not get stuck in just wanting the super cool, latest, most futuristic Minority Report thing that they've seen. And help them understand that there are two really critical parts to getting what they want out of data science or AI. One is understanding that there is actually a roadmap to getting there, and that they're not necessarily at the place where they can flip a switch and now have AI. And that we need to get that message across while not putting things off for 3 years, right? Nobody wants to hear, you're not going to get anything cool for 3 years because you haven't done your homework yet. Let's start with the plumbing. So we want to try to deliver something cool, and entities, organizations want to try to create something valuable and quote unquote cool immediately, but they have to do it in sort of concurrent streams where they're building the groundwork for the greatness that will come soon while getting some value as quickly as they can out of what they already have. That's sort of the first message is, look, you're going to have to clean up your data first. You're going to have to figure out what data you have, and then you're probably going to have to clean it up a lot. And then you're going to have to figure out which problems are actually the high priority problems that you do have something resembling mature data and mature skill sets to start to get value out of. Let's start there. And while we're doing that, let's move along the spectrum from sort of good old classic data management and quality to basic business intelligence and dashboards and analytics to, all right, now let's try to throw some machine learning at this, before we start getting crazy with our, sort of sensing and all the, the sort of fabulous AI stuff. That's sort of message number one for me. Message number two, though, is, look, you've probably already been doing, or the baby steps in data science and AI are essentially the same things, but just slower. The fact of the matter is, in the end, what the machines do better than we do is run many concurrent processes at once across a much greater volume of information and find patterns where the human brain gets overwhelmed, right? But I'm an old man. When I started this this work, we were literally doing, in school I had to use this is, believe it or not, I didn't have a computer to use, right? We didn't have Excel. When we started this, we were doing regressions with a pencil. And so you can do all of this stuff. You just can't do it at the scale that the machines can do it. So first, you have to figure out whether you're doing the right thing. Then go get the machines to do it for you at a greater clip with, at a greater volume and so on. But if you just start throwing, algorithms at questions you haven't formulated properly, you're not going to get value back out of it. So I realize I'm always very biased, sort of as the business side of this, trying to make sure that the tools aren't just expected to perform miracles.
Yeah, definitely. And that actually moves us on to the next question in a really smooth way, because when you first come into the field, you think it's more simple than that. You think that it's a problem that you're trying to solve and you're using certain tools to do so. And you have a use case or you have a certain business intelligence platform to build, and you go ahead and build it. Except when you are in a project, you actually see the complications of how is this tool compatible for this business? Is what I'm doing high priority? Is it going to be of worth to the organization that I'm providing? Who's going to use this tool, or who's going to benefit from this use case? So these questions come up as you have more experience in the field. But what I want to know, maybe we can start with Dina and then move on to you, Dr. Kaveh, how did you start in the field of either data science or digital transformation and technology? So let us know, because this path, as I said, is difficult to go through. It's kind of like a forest, and once you realize all the complications, you notice, okay, this is how I'm going to start a project, and this is the value that I'm going to bring to the table.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I had kind of a traditional entrance into the field through the technical side. I trained as a statistician. I originally actually wanted to be an epidemiologist, which would have meant that my life would be so different right now if I had gone down that path. But the skills that you learn when you do statistics, actually I was fortunate that I didn't have to calculate regressions on pen and paper. We had R, but kudos to you for that. I think it was less for, obviously the educational requirements are not negotiable. You need to understand how to solve the problems, and math and stats are important. But I think for me, kind of coming into the field in a way that's meaningful, it's a mindset issue. Everyone's mentioned about problems, understanding the problems, being able to form a problem statement that's coherent, and then mapping that to value. That can come with years of experience, depending on your environment. For me personally, I've been so blessed to work with some of the smartest people in the world who got me up to speed very quickly, being dragged up a ladder somewhat. So yeah, I think kind of that combination of the technical nous and the critical thinking skills, which you can get, and I think having an organization like DAIA actually really helps with that, because you can get out of the mindset of, which is pretty common and it's understandable why it happens, but newer entrants to the market tend to have a solution and they're looking for a problem, and it's a bit backwards, and you'll do okay with that, but you'll get stuck at some point. And so I think you're having these open forums to understand and making sure there is both the technical and the sufficiently analytical business leadership to keep you honest. Yeah, I think those are the skills.
Okay. So yes, and especially when it comes to our field, there's two paths that are always discussed, which is, do you come into the field in using academia as your entrance, or do you use self-learning and experience to enter into the field? So I feel like from your perspective, it's that academia is very important, but self-learning and the experience of around it is what kind of helps you succeed in the field. Am I getting that right?
Yeah, I agree. Although at the same time, I've met some really brilliant self-taught people who've taught themselves what you learn in university. For me, I think one of the most important things when it comes to data is, when you're in a team, is diversity, and people that learn math and stats maybe a different way, might have a different way of thinking about problems. So I wouldn't go as far as excluding anyone. I wouldn't say, exclude someone that doesn't have a stats degree. I don't think that's fair. You'll get groupthink. So, yeah. But indeed, in terms of like understanding and making sure that you understand how to solve the problems, it is important. But like I say, it's the on-the-job mindset, and you can read all the books. You can read Radical Candor, and you can read all the business books and all this kind of stuff, but nothing beats being on the job and failing at the same thing 1,000 times until you get it right.
Yeah, definitely. Dr. Kaveh, feel free to input on starting out in the career versus academia versus self-learning.
Yeah, so, in general, I agree with Dina that you can, and with what you said, you can come into this either way. My own personal experience, I don't think is particularly relevant because of the time when I was sort of entering this. But what I have seen over the years is some of the best people in the field picked up all of the technical knowledge on the job, came in as subject matter experts, whether it was, you know, statisticians and economists and econometricians, or, you know, in the field of biology, whatever they were studying, they came in as people who were studying a problem set and had to develop some tools to be able to actually identify whether they were asking the right questions and getting the right answers. And that's certainly the story for me, right? I didn't come at this from a sort of computer science standpoint, learn all the tool sets and then go identify which problems I was interested in. And some of the smartest people I know in the field did come about this that way. On the other hand, the other half of the smartest people I know came about it the other way. They really went about it as sort of, you know, hardcore engineers, developers, and they learned the tools. They figured out, they became artists really with the tool set and the processes, and we sort of pointed them at different problem sets, and over the course of digging into those problem sets with other subject matter experts, they then also became subject matter experts in that field, right? 2 years of doing data science with customer experience management as your problem for a telco company, you know, or for a, you know, for a retailer is not going to make you the same level of subject matter expert in telco or retail as that person who's been working in that field for 20 years. But it's going to make you enough of an expert that you are going to do a better job than you did 2 years earlier on those problems. And I think inevitably, it takes both halves of this to really make a great experience, and to allow you as a professional to provide the utmost value back to whatever problem you're trying to address. It doesn't matter as much which end you start in, but I think you need to work your way closer to the middle either way.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we have seen that in reality as well, that those that do have the academic background really appreciate the input that they get from those that came in through experience, and vice versa. And actually, that's also perfect, because the next question is more about soft skills. So when you are building your team, you know that the people applying for the roles that you've put out there are probably technically able to do the job, because they believe that they have the technical qualifications or have been through the required training, or have experienced the tools. But when it comes to soft skills, when we are talking about this field, what are the things that you require of your team members? And we can start with Dina and move on to Dr. Kaveh with this question.
Sure. So this is actually a pertinent question, as I'm recruiting furiously at the moment. So let me just get my interview notes out. I think the soft skills, kind of the key, it's going to sound very fluffy and obvious, and I'm sorry for that, but it's true, is communication. Because you can have the world's greatest idea, but if you can't tell anyone about it, it's worthless. And like I mentioned earlier, essentially for me, all the work we do, irrespective of how fancy the solution is about drawing value from data. And so if you can't tell anyone, it's a non-starter. Of course, this is something that can be learned and trained, and we as numbers people aren't naturally the most charismatic. So it's something that can be trained and honed over time. I do believe you can learn charm. So also, I think understanding that that data is power helps with this kind of thing. When you have the data, when you have the information, you hold a lot of power in your hands, and that can make improving this a lot easier. As well as communication, though, I think that I mentioned about having the mindset, kind of a figure it out, problem solving mindset, along with some kind of pragmatism, understanding that you can do everything, well, you can do anything, but you can't do everything. I think these are my kind of three things I look for. They're kind of hard to measure, very, very, very subjective answer from a normally very, very quantitative person, but I hope that's...
Yeah, Dr. Kaveh, what's one soft skill that you think, I know it's a hard one, but what's one soft skill that you look for?
Without a doubt, I think numbers 1, 2, and 3, to echo Dina, are communication skills, but I'll get a little bit more detailed. I mean, in general, you have to be able to also, generally, I'm going to mimic what Dina said. I think it is utterly critical to be a strong communicator in both directions. That also means being a really good listener, because if you think because you've got this tool and you're out looking for a problem that you're going to throw the whole tool at the problem and things will just happen. They won't, they never do. You really need to help often the business person on the other end who has the problem, help them actually frame that. And so the listening to really dig out what's actually trying to be solved is a critical part of the communication. It's not just outbound communication, right? It's also inbound and understanding. I will add that I think the single most important part of the communication skill boils down to being able to simplify things. As Dina said, especially as quantitative people, we tend to see and love the complexity, which is fabulous, but makes it very difficult to actually communicate the precise next step or the reason why we did the thing we did. The most, I think, the unicorn skill that I have the hardest time finding is the person who can understand the complexity, but can translate that into simplified enough language that somebody less knowledgeable, less technical, can still understand the value of what they're getting back and how this is different. I've had a lot of, we do consulting, of course, and a lot of my clients are just knowledgeable enough to be dangerous and often want to prove themselves by asking, challenging questions because they read something that was really, sort of compelling to them. And you need to be able to understand why they're asking that question and give them a simple enough answer that a simplified enough answer that they can sort of get it and not feel like, they were made to look bad, but they really get it now, they get the value. And as a consultant, this is probably very different. I'll defer to Dina. I've never really been on the sort of, enterprise side doing this work, but as a consultant, just how you manage a client is a critical part of this communication skill, and that's probably true internally. So yeah, it's really about being able to simplify and being able to prioritize and understand, like Dina said, you can do anything, but you definitely can't do everything, and don't try.
Yeah, definitely. And one of the most known, I guess, kind of phrases is taking a complex problem and being to simply talk about it and simplify it, dumb it down that anyone can understand it, even if they're not in the field. And that's one of the key ways to do that is through communication. But speaking of clients and enterprise side versus public sector, that's something that we were interested in having you both converse about, because Dina is from the more private sector, enterprise tech and e-commerce platform side, and we have you, Dr. Kaveh, from the governmental digital transformation aspect. So one question we have is, how does data science in the MENA region differ from that in the US and the EU? What are the main differentiators? And feel free, either of you who feels more comfortable starting out with this question.
Dr. Kaveh, you can go first. It's your turn.
All right. So my experience has been very different in the region than it has outside. All of the consulting work I've done has been here in the region, and it has been much more focused on data and analytics and data science. Before I came here, all of my work was in the US, and one of the companies were in the US. And I did a lot of work in Europe and Asia, but it was never consulting. It was either it was basically enterprise software. So we had a sort of a different, point of view about it. For me, the most interesting differences I see between government commercial approaches, and maybe I'm starting to get into the regional differences too, is I think we all know that here in the MENA region, unlike most other parts of the world, innovation seems to generally be more driven by government than by the private sector. That's not always true, and you absolutely get some fantastic firms, certainly recently, many more, and I think Dina's been working at least two of them that I just heard her mention, who really are like, you know, I mean, I'm from Silicon Valley. These are Valley-esque firms, right? Bringing together really smart people with really good, you know, targeted business strategies and reaching out for the cutting edge processes and tool sets. But that's not common. In the region, it's not very common. You get a lot of, you know, just sort of replicating stuff that has worked elsewhere being sort of brought to the region. So you get a lot of this strategic thinking coming out of government. And I've actually found that to be some of the most interesting work of my entire career. Because of that, is working here with the likes of the government of Dubai and Abu Dhabi and governments in Saudi, where they really are leading the charge on bringing innovative methods and tools to what I, again, as a social scientist, think are the most compelling problems in the world, which are these governmental social problems. Yeah, I think they are, you know, degrees of magnitude more complex than typical business problems, because typical business problems have measurable single bottom line answers in general. If you can generate revenue or maximize your profit, you know, you're generally okay. We're getting better at understanding that businesses too have multiple bottom lines, and that they need to also ensure that they're optimizing not just for their stakeholders and not just, you know, profits, but that they're actually optimizing for other stakeholders like their employees, that they're optimizing for the community they work in, that they are looking not just at, you know, financial bottom lines, but at sustainability bottom lines and so on. So we're getting better at that, but a lot of that is still coming, you know, sort of as a mandate, right? It's coming a little bit more from government than from the business. So I think the biggest difference for me is here in the region is that, and it's, you know, sort of representing the government side, it's that much more compelling when we can find commercial partners, businesses that get that.
Yeah, I see that. And I guess to bridge to Dina's industry, it's more of data products. So what we do, and I guess what I'm also in the consulting field, is what we notice is we're building a whole digital transformation strategy and then embedding data science and AI to enable those businesses to reach that goal. But versus in e-commerce and more private sector, it's more of building that data product that will deliver the impact that company is looking to deliver. So Dina, if you can define for us, what is a data product? How is that important to you, to your company specifically, and to companies like yours in the tech industry?
Sure. So I love data products. Sometimes they're invisible, sometimes you see them. It's basically any way that you are going to use data to make a process or experience better. So data products that I've worked on in the past range from the invisible, like a ranking algorithm. You don't see it, but it affects you. All the way through to an analytics product. At my former employer, Property Finder, there's some really great B2B tools that are provided for real estate agents to understand things around pricing, trends in certain areas. They're both data products in their own right. And it's a way of connecting a user experience to data and how we can make kind of a pipeline from it, so a product in that respect. There is definitely a growing market globally of data as a product rather than part of a process or an afterthought, which is really exciting for me. I think it takes a whole different skill set to really optimize this. I think when you think about some of the regional differences, just to go back to some of Kaveh's point with regards to data products, there is a bit of a tendency I've noticed in industry here to copy and paste from what other markets have done. Which makes sense, because if you think about the maturity of development of the industry here, it's young, but that's kind of exciting, right? So one of my favorite examples is actually Kareem. Imagine a few years ago, a little company, were like, do you know what we're going to do? We're going to take on Uber.
Yeah.
I think as we get more of these, and that's amazing, the audacity of it gets me. I'm like, it's brilliant, it's inspiring. And I think it's just a different timeline. We're just earlier on. For me, in my role now at Talabat, we don't aspire to make data products that are good for the region. We're trying to make globally excellent products. And I think there is definitely a shift I've noticed in the private sector towards this. Less copy pasting. You be inspired by other people's ideas, but Careem was successful because they had a localized strategy and they had a localized product. They had localized and they pulled data and they understood how logistics works in the Middle East. And I think there's more companies that are going to be inspired by these kind of success stories. And I think we're just early on in the book.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And
if I can, I just want to add one thought. It's Dina, thank you for bringing up Careem. I think it is a perfect example. I was a diplomat for a few years, and when Careem started, Mudassar and I met, actually, and we were just sort of chatting about it just randomly. I was the economic officer here at the U.S. consulate, and we were meeting. I was putting on a big entrepreneurship summit with the governments, and we were just meeting a lot of the entrepreneurs here. And Careem was just getting rolling. This was like 2012, and in my humble opinion, the point you made about the localized strategy was the difference. They didn't just say, let's grab that business model and bring it here and do it before they do. They said, what about what they do won't work here? And let's tweak that. And the couple of things that, Uber in the US doesn't have to think about, doesn't have to deal with, that we had to deal with here, that they had to deal with here, and that they did a great job of. And it was the difference when they started. Because of that, started taking Careem, and I never took Uber here. And honestly, it wasn't until many years later when Uber sort of started figuring out on their own that they had missed these distinctions. Careem's drivers were different. Careem's drivers were sort of more presentable. They were more professional. They, spoke English fluently. The cars smelled different. They were presented differently. Those things which you didn't think about in the US at all. It never occurred to any of the people who started or any of the people who were taking the cars that this was a problem. The American sensibility is different. They didn't quite have the same demographic, situations. And it was about identifying that there is a business problem to be solved. And they, yes, used lots of sort of insights to get at this. One of the favorite things I've heard recently in a conversation I was having about how to sort of take data products to market as a consultant, how to talk to clients and others about what we do, was I think we're getting to the point where anybody can bring the tech, or anybody can bring the algorithm, or anybody can even bring the data. As powerful as the data itself is, we're kind of getting to the point where we can all grab it. But what very, very few people are bringing are the insights. Very few people are actually able to do the hard work and understand the target well enough to provide something that is insightful and actionable quickly. And that's the difference between, talking about yourself and talking about the problem.
Definitely. Yeah. Thank you both for your really insightful answers, and I'm sure our attendees really enjoyed the conversation. I'm conscious of time and our cutoff time, so what we're going to move on to next is the Q&A. We have a couple of cool and interesting questions that we'll address, and feel free to pitch in if you want to answer this question, either of you. The first one is from Ahmed, and it's about evaluating the plethora of new graduate programs addressing data and AI in terms of efficacy of bridging the technical gap of people with social science backgrounds like yourselves. And in other words, what makes a good data science AI graduate program? Who feels more comfortable taking this question?
That is a great question. I'm not sure that I will have a satisfactory answer to this, but I'll sort of go back, I think, to what I was what I started saying about the needing to meet in the middle. It's hard to get business subject matter expertise in a data science program. Yeah. And it's not the point of it. You're going to get thrown at 5, 10 different fields, and you should be doing bioinformatics at the same time. I mean, unless you sort of want to focus, I think it's very helpful to get exposed to lots of different fields of science and business and social science so that you come out. So you're not going to have that expertise. But I guess my first thought would be a school that isn't doing that very well, that is not providing a variety of business contexts for the tools and methods that you're learning, is, I think, going to be preparing a less well prepared to provide value from the beginning person. Mm-hmm. Again, unless you're hyper focused, you want to get into a particular field, I would look for someone that is bringing a little bit of that breadth to it. Dina, I'll defer to you.
No, I echo this. And I think maybe from a technical perspective, if that's what you meant, I think if you think about any kind of course, whether it's a master's degree, like you say, you have this big breadth of things that you'll cover. Do understand that these are kind of like a survey of, like a survey of relevant tools and experiences. And I think a good course is one that sets you up to know that this is the start of the journey. And you have many, many paths to go down. I mentioned briefly earlier, I almost went down the path of epidemiology, and now I work for a food delivery company. Understanding that there are these different paths and different branches that come off, I think setting expectations is really, really important. I really respect the courses that also give an understanding of real world working settings. I often have people that approach me, they have really great models that they've built using maybe like Kaggle data sets or toy data sets. I think if anything that's got some experience with like raw, dirty data like that we deal with in a daily basis, I think that would be good also for yourself, so that you're not horrified when you go into industry and you're like, what is this? Goodness me. I
can't work under these conditions.
Yeah, this is torture. So I think that's something as well. Maybe it crosses a bit more into the field of data engineering, but I do feel data engineering and data science are becoming more twins these days. So it's how we run the team at Taliban.
That I don't know how many programs there are like this out there at the master's degree level, but the point Dina brings up does highlight, any place that does a better job of providing real world work experience while you're there, co-ops, internships, where the work is being done within a professional context, not just in the school, that's automatically going to be a step in the right direction. And again, I think Dina brought up a really good example. The data engineering parts of this, the data quality parts of this, as it stands, most of the entities I talk to, their data units end up spending 70–80% of their effort just making the data usable. They have such little effort left for the sort of true, exciting value add, because they've literally had to spend 4 out of 5 days a week just engineering the data to be right, that if you're not familiar with that process, it can be very frustrating and daunting. Yeah.
And if I can just give one piece of advice, I think for anyone who's new to the field, who wants just like one piece of really big direction, it would be spend some time studying and getting your chops in data engineering. It will take you so far. It's something that I learned for myself very painfully. So I really hope at least one person after this will go log on to the AWS console, start doing something. Please, data engineering is often very overlooked. It's hard, silent work, and I think you'll get a lot out of spending some time in this space.
Yeah, that moves us on to one more question we're going to take, then we're going to have to close off due to time. But one, it actually fits perfectly into your answer, Dina, is someone is a fresh graduate in computer science and engineering, and they wanted to know what are the key things that you look for in a candidate who's applying for an internship role in data science, because they're interested in learning and gaining the experience, but they're new to the field. So what's some advice or key requirements?
That's a great question. Welcome to the field, firstly. You have many insightful hours ahead of you. In terms of getting an internship, I personally have never run one, unfortunately. I'd love to one day. I think it's really valuable. I would say my one key piece of advice for you here, as well as obviously study data engineering, would be get a portfolio. I think you can show, not tell. Understand that the field of new entrants is growing, which is a fantastic thing, but it can be difficult for already stretched leaders in data to be able to find the gems. So I think if you can show someone how good you are, it doesn't matter how much experience you've got. If you've solved a problem and you formed it well, and you're like, look, I'm amazing at this, and I'm going to show you how good I am. Yeah, that's going to get you in. It's going to get you an internship. It's going to get you the job you want. I think that's it. And it comes down to communication again.
Yeah, definitely, because the job description or role that you apply to can say 4 to 6 years of experience, but if you're not showing how you're going to add that value, you might have 1 year of experience or no experience, but show value more than someone who spent 6 years in the field.
The best data scientist I ever hired had 6 months of experience.
I was just about to say the same thing. The best data scientist I hired was fresh out of her master's in data science program. And I'll be very specific. The reason it worked is her portfolio, which at that point consisted of essentially one real life project and problem, there were two really important things about what she was able to do, which made it clear that she would be very valuable. One was that she had actually taken something from start to finish. She hadn't just played a piece in a little part of it. She had formulated questions. She had explored the problem and the data and worked with people to do it. She had then, sort of navigated around, tried to figure out what was there, made mistakes, learned from those mistakes, tried models. Some worked, some didn't work. I mean, she had just gone through the entire life cycle, and she had done it, right? It wasn't just part of a team where she could talk about one part of it and not other parts of it. She had done it, and you could see that full movement. But to reiterate again the point Dean was making, the fact was, if she was not capable of creating a good presentation and talking about it smoothly, with confidence, with the knowledge that comes from having been the one who did it and being able to communicate it confidently, I would never have known. No matter what, if she wasn't able to communicate that fact clearly, I would not have known that she had done all that great stuff. It wouldn't have come out. So yes, she needed to do the great stuff end to end, but she needed to be able to talk about it comfortably and with pretty pictures on slides.
Yeah, for sure. So I think with your alarm clock, we're almost
that
done.
Is my pumpkin midnight strike.
Yeah. So thank you so much. We've answered the key highlights of the Q&A, and any we'll probably address on our page. Any questions that are lingering, and maybe we'll contact you for those answers. But for now, thank you so much for joining. Today was a really great conversation, and we hope that you join us to watch the next couple of series that were over the next few months that are engaging conversations like these. So great to meet both of you. Thank you so much. We realize the hard stop, and feel free to contact us for any questions. If you'd like to be mentors for people who are just starting out, that's something we're also discussing. So thank you again, and thank you to all the attendees as well.
Sign me up. All right, thank you.